Cool. Well, should we, a couple of minutes past, so should we crack into it? And a few other people will usually join in the next 5 minutes. So I'm just going to crack into my usual spiel for those who have been on here before, and then pass the torch. So welcome to this must be the 6th episode of the Post-Harvest Debrief series that we're running. A few people on here have been on most of them. There might be 1 or 2 new names in that list that's with us so far. This week's we've got Roger Small and Mike Porter. Last week, 2 weeks ago, sorry, we had the slugs special, which was a bit of a sort of slight dive into a specific topic. And we've got a few more to come. I think we might have Dave Mitchell in a week or 2, and then we're thinking about getting a couple of farmers that are fresher into the transition on for a bit of a panel session where they can throw some curly questions at a panel of farmers who have in some cases been in their situation before. So looking forward to those. Righto. With that in mind, over to you, Jono.
Cool. Thanks, Sam. It's today we've got Roger Small and Mike Porter on, both South Canterbury lads in the arable sector. Just a little bit about myself. So I've been involved with Quorum Sense from the onset, and it's been really exciting to watch this thing grow from an idea that was brought up around a piece of paper on a nail to a wall in the shed at Harts Creek Farm to the beast that it is now. I see Facebook, we're getting close to 2,000 members, which is pretty exciting. And it's really humbling to see the development of the group as a whole and also all the people within it. So Roger and Mike are members of Quorum Sense, and Roger, he's down a bit below Mike Porter, sort of closer to Waimate area on the main drag, and Mike Porter is down in a bit further south. A bit further south in. Actually, no, you're not really. No, you're not further south. You're north, aren't you, Mike? Mike's sort of just south of Timaru. And today we're going to hear Roger and Mike talk a bit about their experiences and a lot of their key learnings that they've experienced in their very long sort of and from what it sounds like, rather eventful careers in arable farming. And so this evening, we're going to start off with Roger kicking off, and then we're going to hear a bit from Mike, and then we're going to get into some Q&A stuff towards the end, where we'll address some of the questions that people come up with during the conversation. And if anyone's got any questions, just chuck them up on the Q&A, and Sam and I will get to them if it's relevant throughout the session, if not towards the end of the session. So, Roger, if you'd like to go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a bit about what you've been up to for the last wee while.
Oh, well, thanks, Jono, and hello to everybody out there. It's just great what Jono and Sam and his team with Nigel and Simon, David are doing with this group, and really appreciate the work you're doing. I'm a little bit about myself. We farm, as Jono said, down Waimate at a place called Willow Bridge. It's got very good silt loam soil, high potassium, good for growing potatoes on, which we used to do, but haven't for the last 20 years. We farm with my wife, and now I've got 2 teenage boys that are sort of quite keen on farming. We farm about 285 hectares. 210 of it would be arable, with then the rest in pastoral or multi-species herbal type pasture, which I've only just incorporated the last sort of 3 years to try and improve my soil a bit more. We've got 110 hectares irrigated, the rest dry land. The reason we went into irrigation really was because a scheme was coming through, and we decided we should join up to future-proof the farm, even though I'm sort of more a dry land farmer. That's what I've been used to. We've been incorporating straw, all our crop residues since the early 1980s, and then in the late 90s we sort of dabbled into direct drilling with a cross-slot drill that a contractor, so I got a contractor down, Mark Scott and Doug Hodder, and it was with the cross-slot, we gave it a go for about 6 years, but we couldn't, we're having trouble with the disc stalling on our soil, and just seemed to be a bit too soapy underneath, and it would bulldoze the residue in front. So even though, you know, the idea was right, and maybe I should have stuck with it, persevered, because it, you know, it's great for going into cover crops, but we decided that we needed to just look at a tine hoe culture drill. So we bought a John Dale drill out of the UK with a seed hawk tine, and that, if nobody's familiar with that, it's actually has two tines, a leading tine which places fertiliser, and then a wee seed tine and behind it with a sort of a gauge wheel, and that has been very successful for us. We've had great yields out of that drill. The only problem with it is that in the high residue loads, like when you've got, you know, these big straw crops that we've been growing, and in our climate where we're near the coast, we don't always get the right weather to chop up the straw perfectly, and so there'll be times when I would block that drill, even though it's got big, huge, wide row spacing. It's at 10 inches, I think, and 4 rows of tines. It would get a bit frustrating, and so I made a decision last year to have a go with a weaving GD, which I imported into the country. I was one of the first ones with Dave Mitchell to have that drill, and with the idea being that I wanted to try and improve my soil more. I just felt that we've been growing crops, you know, sort of the normal cereals, wheat, barley, and then a break, sort of like a 9-year rotation with brassicas and peas and barley, clover, sometimes linseed, but I just felt the soil, you know, initially we had quite a few worms, earthworms, and we still have in quite a few paddocks, but some paddocks we haven't. It seemed like they're declining, even though we've got all this residue sitting on top. Just felt something was missing, and that we needed to maybe have something growing, you know, year round, and probably coming from having used a cross slot, where the first year we tried it, and we sowed in a cover crop into barley stubble, and into wheat stubble actually, and half of the paddock grew very well, and the other half, which was next to a clover paddock, got wiped totally out by slugs. And then when I did sow my following crop of barley in the spring, the end where the slugs had wiped me out totally, the barley yielded very well with the cross lot. But the other end where I had my cover crop, which had been grazed, it was, you know, quite poor. So I've always been a bit nervous about cover crops, and but I do think that they definitely, you know, help the life in the soil, and I think the evidence of that now around the world is, you know, reasonably overwhelming. Like if we could also autumn sown crops, that would be marvellous, but with no till, you know, you get a lot of grass weeds, and you really need to have spring sown crops to break that grass weed cycle. So yes, that yeah, that probably covers it off. Or we could maybe put up a a photo there, Sam, now if you'd like. So that picture there is it's actually off my boy's drone video. I thought the video might be a bit long, but that's us sowing into radish this year. We've done a trial in this paddock because we just wanted to see the difference between the tine drill and the weaving, which doesn't disturb the soil at all. It has a double disc on a 25-degree angle, and so it just lifts up a wee flap of soil and then places the seed in and then pushes it back down, and you can't really see where it's been. So there we're just sowing wheat, Graham wheat, and it's well, it had all it's had on it is serpentine super, and so we're just sowing through there. We can go on to the next photo. It's another shot there just showing the difference between the disturbance. There's with even though the dale's on wide row spacing at 10 inches, you still get soil throw with that, so it always looks like it's disturbed more soil than it actually has. So really want to probably sow reasonably slowly with that, and then the weaving there, just really doesn't disturb the soil at all. So we can go on to the next one. That there is we've just sowed milling wheat. This is into multi-species pasture of clover, plantain, chicory, red clover and lucerne, and so we had grazed it up until sort of late February and then let it come away, and luckily recently we had rain which made it grow a bit more, so probably up about 8 inches high when we drilled through it. No fertiliser down the spout or anything, it's just the seed put in the ground with some trichoderma, and so you can see there's really no disturbance there, and so that was terminated after sowing, a couple of days after sowing, and that's a new thing for me to do on 30 hectares. It's a bit of a big experiment, but we'll just see what happens. I'm confident that in the autumn I think that will be okay. So we can move on to the next slide. Might be a bit hard to tell there, but this is wheat just coming up, drilled with the weaving drill into pea stubble from last year, and this paddock last year had after barley I'd sown with my dale drill rye and ryegrass, and that was grazed over the winter, let to grow away again, and got up to probably just above my knee. I'm a reasonably tall guy, about 6'4", so you can imagine it was quite a reasonable amount of stuff, and we drilled straight through that, and it was sprayed off about 2 or 3 days before, and so it was after that the peas come away. I'm not sure if that might be a bit further on, I can talk about that, but at the moment that's just shows you how low disturbance this weaving drill is. Can move on to the next slide. That there is into a paddock where this is the second year of a cover crop, and that there is just triticale and crimson clover, and then there's annual ryegrass. I've got 2 different types of cover crops in the same paddock. I haven't done a lot of species in there. There is supposed to be Phacelia in there, but we got a line we've had it 2 years in a row now, which has had very, very poor germination. In fact, hard to find a plant at all in the paddock. And so this will go into radish next year. And that's had no fertiliser or anything, it's just growing away there. It's had slug bait though, about 10 kgs of dusk, because we've had issues with slugs in our damp environment. When the residue there, slugs are always a bit of an issue, although, you know, I'm baiting less than I used to do, so that's encouraging.
Do you want me to show that video quickly, Roger?
Yes, you could do, Sam.
All right, here we go.
That's just drilling into some mustard, greenleaf mustard stubble with the weaving drill. I'm not sure, it might not be loading very well, but just gives you a gist of, it can handle any amount of residue. Yeah, it doesn't block at all. It's very good in that regard. Is there some more there, Sam? Or is that...
I think it was all of them. Was there another email of photos that
was
came through there?
Yeah.
All right, I'll just
While you're looking for that, Sam, Roger, can you tell us a bit about your experience with, I know adiopathics has been a real focal point for you, especially in the recent seasons with playing with cover crops. And, you know, it's probably the reason, I'm assuming, why you've gone in and played with terminating post-drilling, which is a fantastic idea. Would you like to just speak to what you've learnt and some of the key points for others to take into account with regards to terminating high amounts of biomass and direct drilling in, and some of those time frame concerns?
Yeah, well, John, I had about 5 years ago, I had just a ryegrass sort of winter feed crop or cover crop, and that was after wheat, and it was a beautiful looking, you know, cover crop, thick, and we grazed probably 2/3 of the paddock, and then sort of the feed got away on us, so we just sprayed that off, and then a couple of weeks later drilled into it, or 10 days. It came away fine for a start, but then started to, you know, go a bit yellow and so on, and I thought it was nitrogen, so I chucked a heap of nitrogen on it, and it didn't make any difference to it whatsoever. And so in the end, it did come, but it always felt to me like it almost had a glyphosate type, you know, taken up glyphosate. But anyway, fast forward to last year, and after wheat again, I sowed in vetch, or the Phacelia buckwheat and crimson clover, and had quite a bit of volunteer wheat coming up, and another, again, wonderful looking cover crop. Grazed it in August, and then let it come away again to spray it off late September to sow into barley, and it ended up, when we sowed the barley, the ground was a bit sealed off, and we were with a new drill, the weaving drill, which doesn't disturb the ground much, but then at the same time probably doesn't aerate it a lot either. So we had a few factors that probably working against the barley, and but the barley came up. I did have pictures there, it's just a pity they haven't come through, but the barley came up, and then the same thing, looked quite sick. One corner where we had no residue and there hadn't been a cover crop growing, was just a bit that was missed. The barley previously, then the barley, yeah, it was looked really good there, yet it had been packed down with the sheep and so on, was quite firm on top, and it got me concerned. So I got a soil test done. And
hey, Roger, I've got those. I'll just quickly, I managed to get, I've only put 4 of them up, sorry, because they're such big files that they took a long time to come through on the email. But
Oh, that's right.
I'll just share them on there. Here we
Yeah,
go.
that's it. Yeah, that's the. So this is the barley. Looks good and right in front of you in that corner, but then the rest of the paddock not so good. That's a soil test, which shows everything, pretty reasonable. Then the next slide, I think there's a plant. There might be a plant analysis that we did as well, which came back low manganese, which had me concerned about glyphosate and all the stories I'd read about glyphosate and it chelating manganese. I don't know if that's totally it might be a bit of the case, but I think maybe we've just got low manganese. But we put manganese on, 2 applications of Mantrac, and might have helped a fraction, but not really. The crop still got quite sick. I'd also put nitrogen, put fish fertiliser on, about 20 litres of fish fertiliser to try and get it kicked into gear, but no, it was quite sick all the way through and ended up yielding about 5.5 tonne to the hectare, where we normally get probably in a year like this should have had 9 tonne to the hectare. I also got I'm not sure if that's there, Sam, there might be a couple of slides with the glyphosate test, but we got a glyphosate test done with the soil.
There you go.
So that glyphosate test showed just a trace of glyphosate in the soil, and also AMPA, which glyphosate breaks down to, but really just not much. And the plant test for glyphosate showed none. So I'm pretty sure it's not glyphosate, but there is a theory. A couple of guys in the UK, Simon Cowell's one of them. He's was Soil Farmer of the Year back in 2018 over there. He'd been growing cover crops for, he tried it for 5 years, and always in the spring he had this trouble that I've been having, and he said the better the cover crop was, the worse his cash crop was. So he's gone away from growing cover crops that go through to the spring. He will terminate about 8 weeks beforehand, and then I had a slide there with the letter he'd written that people may be able to get access to, but he was saying that it was phytotoxins, acetic acid and butyric acid and so on that they thought was coming from the breaking down plant. After it was terminated, it released these acids, which also encouraged pathogens into the soil. So that was one theory, and the other one, which I recently got onto, which I think maybe explains it, it's part of that equation, is that maybe it is Pythium. I'd love to be able to test my soil for it. The pea crop, I'm not sure if the photo of the peas is there, Sam, but my peas that were into the rye, they had no fertiliser, came up looking really good, but then also started to look a bit sick, especially in sort of a third of the paddock. And that was terminated prior to me drilling. And I'm just concerned with the low disturbance drill that I'm not, with the lack of oxygen there in the top surface, and that may improve as my worm activity improves, of course, that this Pythium is going to be an issue. It's well documented in Australia. I'd also forwarded a GRDC article on Pythium, which shows in rainfall over 350 millimetres that it's quite a problem over there, costing them hundreds of millions of dollars. And I think it's something we need to be aware of. But I think the encouraging thing is that trichoderma has been known to, get the biology working to overcome the pathogen. And so something I'd really like to see a lot of work done on here in New Zealand, actually, far to do something on it, because, you know, I can see the potential of the cover crops, but just at the moment I'm going to be quite cautious about it. And so I'd encourage anybody that was just getting into it to just do a small area of their farm and then work their way into it as they get more confident, rather than doing a large area. So I think that's probably all I've got to say on that at the moment. But,
Awesome.
you know, I'm not a scientist, but I can just observe, you know, what's happening here, and so I'm looking for information. I've been farming now. I'm in my 50s and been farming since I, you know, 20. So I've had reasonable amount of experience, and it just seems to be when I go to low disturbance type drilling that I have these issues. So, but I think, you know, it will work. It just has to, I just have to get onto the right formula.
Beauty. Hey, cheers, Roger. What would life be without a few more mysteries to solve? I'll bet you're not alone in that one.
The one encouraging thing is the peas. When I harvested them, they ended up about 3.9 tonne of white peas, and we're normally closer to 5. But there was absolutely no dust. The residue with the big tall rye lying on the ground, even though it was rotting away, it just covered the soil, so there was no dirt, and our peas are, usually they're dusty, dirty things, but this year they were perfectly clean and beautiful size too.
Awesome. Hey, we might take a couple of quick questions that have come through for you just before we head on across the mic. Jono's video's disappeared, so I don't know if you're still there, mate. But we had one from Nigel wondering if you apply any biostimulants in that. Obviously, there was the trichoderma, but is there anything else in your program?
This year, I've just placed the trichoderma itself. I've been playing with the fish hydroslate, and in the peas last year, we put on about 20 litres and 2 hits of 10 litres, and I couldn't see even on the header yield monitor there was no difference, and so I'm just not too sure about that side of it. I still would like. I'll still play around with that, but maybe I should be using kelp and a few of those things. I've just got to. I'd just like to maybe see somebody else that has got on very well with those things. I'd like to see those results, I suppose. But definitely think the trichoderma and maybe some of those other bacteria inoculants, like for the soil would be, well worth it.
Awesome. And there's a comment here from Simon Lockhead. I don't think you've seen it, saying that he's in really manganese deficient country on deep but light silt, and has found Mantrack a waste of time. He's sort of relevant to your comment before, and said that. Oh, you there, Jono?
Yeah, apologies about that. My computer crashed, and I've just jumped back on my phone, so I apologise to people for.
Oh, no worries, mate. That's the beauty of having co-hosts. And Roger just is saying that he's had quite a lot of success with manganese sulfate as a foliar.
For that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good to know. I've actually spread manganese sulfate on this year, in front of my crops. So, but that's good to know. Thank you.
Awesome. Cool. And last question on here before we head across the mic. Simon Osborne wondering what species you've got in your cover crop. Possibly use species that prepare for the next crop, such as Crimson, Phacelia, Vetch and Oats before. It says creams, but I assume that means cereals.
Yes. I've been disappointed I haven't had Phacelia, work for us yet. And I think it's just the bad seed line we're onto. If we can, get that in there as well. yeah, we've got to be a bit careful as a seed producer, you know, just what we grow as a cover crop, because we don't want hard seed coming up and becoming a problem in our next, you know, cash crop, which, you know, could throw it out. So, yeah, I'm just going very cautiously.
Brilliant. Hey, cool. Hey, thanks so much for that, Roger. No doubt there'll be some more questions later on when we have a bit more of an open convo between yourself, Mike, Jono, and myself. But for now, Mike, are you ready to go, mate?
Yep, I'm ready to go. Am I up on screen?
Yep, you're on screen.
Oh, yeah.
And if you want to share your presentation when you're ready, I'll let you know when it's up there.
I'll just put one. I'll put one picture up. I just want to see that everything's going to run all right. So if I go share there, right. Now, how do I do this again?
Basically, whatever you see, we should see. So.
Oh, shit. Okay. Oh, geez, what have I done? I might have to get my daughter in here again. Shit, I think I might have just wiped that picture. Unless it's that one. No, it's that one. Right, okay. I'll just, oh, shit. I'm going to have to, now.
There you go.
Has that got a picture on there now?
Yep, that's good.
Right, okay. Yep, so that's the lie of our land. Basically, we're 480 hectares, of which 400 is usually our arable harvest. We have about 700 breeding ewes, and we trade cattle sort of anywhere about 50 odd, somewhere around there usually. And our annual rainfall is 525 millimetres. Spring is very fickle, windy and dry, so we can't really rely on spring. So most of our crops are autumn sown. So that's sort of where we're at. These photos, most of them were taken, they're all taken within the last 2.5 years, and I'll tell you whether any of them are recent or not, as in this season. So yeah, so we'll go from there, I think. Now I've just got to figure out how to get out of this. What do I do? Do I do that? Yep. Okay. So what's happening now on the screen? Am I back on?
No, we're still looking at your desktop. Well, so if you go into your PowerPoint now,
okay,
you can flick through some photos. Yeah,
right. So so what I had was that my big problem was that we've got similar soils to Roger, where we're silt loam soils, but they range in depth anywhere between 0 and 500 millimetres, and that's all because of cultivation damage from previous owners and previous members of my family. I should say we're third generation on farming in this area, but yeah, we've sort of chopped and changed land all around the place. So anyway, in 1998, we made the decision to go 100% no-till, because I saw that as being the be-all and end-all of having stopping soil movement. After, by the way, I should say, after investigating selling the lot and shifting down to a flat arable farm in mid-Canterbury. But that couldn't work because we're carrying intergenerational debt brought about by us doubling our acreage on the 10th of December 1983. And of course, 1984 was election year, lost subsidies, producer boards were deregulated, the rest is history. So we were one of those farmers that should have gone broke, but we were just too bloody stubborn to go broke. We were negative 9% equity, and we'd had 2 foreclosure notices from the Rural Bank before eventually we got a small family loan, and that kept us going, and we've gone from there. So we're the survivors. But the downside with being a survivor is it leaves you very cash poor, high debt, and we've got to do everything out of profit. So we don't have the ability to borrow lots of money. So it's been an interesting experience, but it's been a wild ride. So yeah, like I was saying, since 1998 we've been 100% no-till, but we really didn't make any progress until I made a few discoveries. And a couple of 3 years ago, we ran, is that up there now?
Yep.
Yep, that's good. I'm on the case. Yep, so this is Dr. Christine Jones up at Leaston or somewhere around there. I was invited to that by one of your members, and I'm eternally grateful for that. And it was this sort of thing that was getting that we came to a bit of a dead end, because we had really nice looking soil, 20 years of no-till, or almost 20 years in the top 100 millimeters, 125 millimeters, but below that it was as if we had never gone no-till. We couldn't see the benefits down low. We could only see them up front. And in this presentation, she was talking about things like, she was talking about arming the soil. She was talking about living roots, about diversity, about integration of livestock. Those are 4 out of 5 of the main tenets of what we try to do around here. So that got me thinking, and from there, I got hold of Jono through Lynn's Facebook account, and we carried on from there. And so I'm new to a lot of this. A lot of people might look at what we do and think, oh yeah, he knows what he's doing, but he actually doesn't. He's really only dabbling around the outside at the moment. So we're growing the cover crops, and we're making quite a job of that, but we're not doing a lot as far as the biostimulants and the real regen ag stuff goes. We're just trying to work out how we can integrate it all in. So yeah, as a result of Jono's first visit, he came up with a list of what we could do to replace kale. I should actually go back. I might actually go to, now, where are we? So this is the sort of thing that we were dealing with. Can you see that? Yep, good. This is the sort of thing we were dealing with when we were wintering cows on kale, up to 2 years old, so not very big. But we were stirring soil up, making a hell of a mess. And I didn't like the bare soil, and I didn't like the damage that was being done. Even though we run a cross-lot drill, and that thing is a bloody miracle worker. People might talk about how heavy it is, or hard to pull, or expensive, or whatever you happen to criticize about it. But my God, it's a miracle worker. It just depends on whether you think you can justify owning one or not, is the big question for that I reckon people should be asking. But anyway, that's what it'll do. It does that sort of thing out of that pugged ground. So, but all that was doing was repairing damage. I just figured that it was not a good idea to do that damage right from the start. So Jono moved in, and we had a bit of a talk about things, and I was talking about trying to come up with an idea on how to replace the kale. And so we came up with that list that I had there. There's 20 species there, but we added another one, but I can't remember what it was. So I call it the 21 species cover crop. And this is what we're grazing our trading cattle on this year. Just young fellas, our calves. So, yeah, and that's been a bit of a wild ride. We planted this, which was, very interesting getting that down through the drill, but the drill just absolutely loved it. And we ended up with an establishment like that, and everything was going along nicely. And that had no fertilizer. I had all the plans on putting fish and doing all these other things to it. But to be perfectly honest, I got caught up in the moment with the arable harvest and looking after the arable crops, and I forgot. So it actually ended up having no fertilizer on it, which is a bit of an embarrassment. But anyway, that's what we had. A little bit later on, we ended up with that, which is the video that appeared on Quorum Sense at one stage when I was saying, where the hell would we be without this? And just as an aside, that paddock of wheat in the background, I don't know whether you can make out, it looks a bit weedy on the left-hand side. That is thin because of the allelopathic toxicity that Roger was talking about before. So it's happening, it happened with me as well, just as an aside. So anyway, then we got into, so that in February, everything finessed off, and we ended up with that. And I thought, holy hell, what a mess. What are we going to do with this? This is going to be a complete disaster by the time the cows move in. Because we got a very dry summer, very dry autumn. But then eventually, once the cattle moved in, we ended up with that. And there was another one there as well, hopefully. Yeah, there. So that's what it looks like now, which still doesn't look anywhere near as beautiful as it did when it was in flower. But you can see there's a beautiful understory there that has sunflower heads and kale in the top. And I reckon the only improvement I could make with it was that I think I'm going to grow less oats in it, and I'm going to put winter wheat in there. Because if winter wheat doesn't senesce, if we plant it in spring and it doesn't get a chance to senesce, it'll still be vegetative now. So I reckon that might be where I could get a bit more green out of it, because I reckon there's enough carbon in there, but it just needs, I reckon maybe it needs a bit more green. So, so yeah, interesting progress. So this was my first foray into grazing cover crops, but we've been growing cover crops all over the place up until, you know, for the last probably 3 years or somewhere around there. And we've been, this year we actually grazed our pastures a lot more. We didn't take them right to the ground like we normally do, and that was a fantastic thing to do. We leaving that cover on the top slowed the wind speed down, no bare soil, the sun didn't get a chance to get down there and bake, and it was amazing how much clover and plantain and things that were in that permanent pasture that actually survived better than I thought they would. So that was interesting. But yeah, what we used to do up until we grew the cover crops was we would just retain the residue and we would just drill into it. So we would end up with, we would be, now if I can get the order of these right, I'll try there. Yeah, no, hang on. Oh, there, yep, okay. So that's this year's photo. I took that today. So that's planted in barley a couple of weekends ago, I think it was. So that the barley's about halfway up out of the ground. It's you know, got shoots on it about probably an inch long. So that's the sort of thing that we're doing now, and that is out of a cover crop of it's ex-wheat, full residue retention, and we had what do we have in there? We had oats, rye corn. Actually, it's probably here somewhere, the list. No, can't find it. Oh, it'll be down there. Cover crop. No. There it is. So that's what we planted. There we are. Oats at 5, rye at 20, Phacelia at 1, vetch at 10, crimson at 2, and it's not berseem, it's actually balansa. It was balansa clover at 1.5. And so that was what I planted. The clovers were a bit of an experiment because I'd always done those other 4, but I'd had more, I'd aired more towards the oats than I had the rye corn. So I've turned it around because the information I was getting was that the oats were the main cause of the allelopathic toxicity and the rye corn wasn't. And that was as a result of a video call I made straight to the top. I just went straight to the top, and I had a conversation with Steve Groff from the USA, runs a company called Cover Crop Coach, or runs a, you know, that's what he calls himself, Cover Crop Coach. So we had a bit of a talk about things, and this is what we came up with. So so yeah, hopefully that'll this time we won't get it, but yeah, I used to put in like anything up to 30 or even 40 kilograms of oats, and I've cut it right back. So so that's what we're doing. So yeah, the barley, so that's what we're normally drilling into, is something like that. Looking down on it, that's what we get. So it's, yeah, Roger was talking before about residue management of his red drill. The cross lot is pretty damn good as well, but we won't go there because we're not talking about machinery today. So then, yeah, you end up with the, this is one of last year's barleys. So you end up with that sort of thing there, barley coming through, and oh, there's a, oh no, yeah, there's a, I can see a little bit of stem weevil just down there if you can see my cursor. Yeah, so that's the sort of thing that we're doing. None of these have had slug bait, by the way. They just didn't need it. To me, the cover crop is a brilliant canary in the coal mine. It tells me whether we've got, on the day of drilling or before drilling, I can look at a cover crop, and if I can find any slug damage at all, then we'll lay traps. But otherwise, we virtually won't lay traps, because if there's no damage in the cover crop that was drilled I like to think that a cover crop can be in the ground it's got to be in the ground for at least 6 weeks. So these ones here, we come out of the arable harvest, out of last year's harvest, we put it into a cover crop for at least 6 weeks, usually 6 to 10, and then we'll go into an autumn sown crop the year, for the following season. And so if there's no damage in that cover crop, then there's no slugs in there, so I don't bait. So that's my only theory there. So there's another view of the barley. You can see one rogue Phacelia plant, which I don't think is a problem at all. Then the barley gets a bit older and you end up with that sort of thing there. So you can see that the cover crop's completely gone and all we've got is last year's wheat residue. So this was last year. This was about, this was like in early spring last year, I think this was taken. So this is what we just harvested. So yeah, so that's the sort of thing that we're doing. And where are we? So then getting into the cover crops, I'm quite mindful now of the roots, because I think that what we needed to do was to get deeper roots and get more variability, more diversity in our cover crops. So so based on that, we came up with that list, and we were, and now we just grow, we take a wheat paddock. There's a typical wheat stubble where we've got a bit of wheat. We'll just wait a wee while and get a bit of regrowth wheat there. You can see there's a few wheat heads, so there'll be a bit of volunteer wheat in there as well. And we'll drill into that. And so that's one paddock. Then there's another one about 2 paddocks away there we're drilling into. So that's typical of what we'll drill into. You can see there that it's been terminated. And then we end up with young cover crops, which will look like that, or like, there's looking straight down on it. So that one there was just a simple mix. It was the same thing. We've just got the vetch, Phacelia, oats, and rye corn. But that's one of last year's, so it's got a whole lot more oats in it. And yeah, that's what it looks like coming up through the stubble. So looks quite cool, really. It's a great way to get rid of grass weeds too, because we can terminate them at the same time that we terminate the cover crop. Yeah. So yeah, that's what we use. There's the cross slot there, just a 23 run air drill. 2004, so it's got a bit of age on it. The only thing that it's 3.5 meters wide. I would like it to be 6, and I'd like the row spacings to be 8-inch rather than 6-inch. I reckon that would be my ideal drill, pulled by a pivot, a big pivot steer tractor to get the power to the ground. So that's really the sort of thing we're looking for. So when we're going, but that's, like I was talking before about how there's minimal soil disturbance, but when you get into something like oilseed rape stubble, it really moves stuff, because the oilseed rape ground is usually reasonably soft. So it does that sort of thing there. It really ridges it up, and we've got to be careful that we don't do too much soil disturbance. So, but yeah, you can see the hills in the background. What we work, we go from 0% slope up to 60. The steepest we crop is 67%, which is quite bloody steep. To give you an idea of 67%, that's 65. So it's, you sort of got to, like I've always said, our children were born with one leg longer than the other, because it takes a bit of effort to walk around these hills sometimes. So, so yeah, that's what we do. So, but to handle that, we've got to have pretty specialist equipment. So you can see there that the drill, there's the weight of the crane on one side, but then that makes the other side light. So you put a 1/2-ton bag of fertilizer on the other side and just carry that around with you. And each one of those weights is 1/2 a ton each. So we've got 1.5 tons on each side. So there's 3 tons of suitcase weights plus a 1/2 ton of fertilizer on the side, just to keep things on the level. So so yeah, there's interesting ways of doing things. But I suppose a few of you might know that to run a header on there, you've got to do something pretty clever. And Lynn and I have made 2 trips to the States. And when we went over there, we were seeing this sort of thing and thought, oh my God, why the hell didn't I know about this 20 years ago? So this harvester here is equipped with, it's an old dunger, but it's equipped with a RACO leveling kit. R.A. Henson & Co. made these around in Washington State. So we investigated bringing a harvester out of there. couldn't manage it. It was just too expensive and too logistically difficult. So we ended up going to the UK, had a harvester modified in France, and then brought it out here. So we ended up with what's known, this is a single axis leveling. It only levels sideways, one way. We ended up with a 2-axis leveling machine so that we could climb hills with it, because these guys don't have fences. They just go round and around the contour, so they don't need to climb, but we needed to climb. So we bought a John Deere T670, 4-wheel drive, big fat tyres, and a specialist rapeseed front. And we proceeded to have it modified. So this is what we ended up with here. So that's how we get around the hills. So yeah, we use this thing, although 4-wheel drive isn't really all that necessary, because the centre of gravity stays in the centre. So it's quite easy to get around the hills with this thing. And it gives you a false sense of security. It's actually really, really comfortable riding around on this thing. It just, like our farm, I quite often say now that our farm is flatter than mid-Canterbury when we're harvesting it. We just don't get, we don't get the hillside damage that we used to, and the stresses. And we do some pretty steep stuff, like that sort of thing there in ryegrass. So the header told me there that we were about 90% maxed out on the rear lift. So it goes just a wee bit further than that. But the problem is that in order to, when it lifts the back up, it's also got to lift the front up. Otherwise the front will be digging in the ground. So when it reaches 90% like that, the front runs out of lift, because the front is basically up under the cab. It's lifted fully up. So you can't actually run the thing at 100%, otherwise the front drags on the ground. So yeah, so there we go. There's my little machinery spiel. So yeah, just another wheat one there. That's second year wheat, X wheat, with a cover crop, but that's late enough that even when the wheat is at that early stage, the cover crop is completely gone. It's just disappeared. That was an ungrazed cover crop. So and to give you an idea of what the cover crops were, there was we had the list there, and then we drill. Oh no, yeah, we saw those anyway. There was there's a medium cover crop there. And then the second year wheat is usually drilled into that sort of thing there. So that was one of last year's, and it was quite, that was the year before's. That one was the year before's, where we had, we didn't have as dry autumn as we had this year. So most of our cover crops this year that we were drilling into looked like that. So we only had half the bulk that we were dealing with, but yeah, the drill we have will just handle anything. It just comes down to what you want to leave on the top. So, so yeah, there we go. And so now I'm starting to experiment with pastures, thinking that the biggest problem we had was that according to Doug Ed Meads, the biggest problem that New Zealand farmers have is that they have too much ryegrass in their pastures. Even when you're not talking regen ag, the problem is that the seed companies are recommending anywhere between 15 and 30 kilograms to the hectare of grass seed, which is way, way too much. It's not giving the clovers a chance to fix nitrogen, so we're having to add a lot of nitrogen to our pastures to make them grow. That's according to him. So I've been sort of experimenting with, different pastures. And I came up with this list, which I'm sorry it's sideways, but that was my first attempt at doing my own mix. And I was doing a Peter Barrett here where I decided, okay, let's just throw the whole bloody seed shed at it and see what grows. So what I've got in here is I've got annuals and I've got perennials, because I want this to last between 3 and 4 years. So, because 4 years is an old pasture for us. So I've just put in anything that I could think of that I could, so we've got annuals for a quick bulk up of feed, because it was so dry this autumn. I thought I'll see if I can get a graze off it before winter, a graze or two. And then we've got a mixture of perennial grasses in there, whether they be the cocksfoot, the phalaris, the timothy, prairie grass, and a tetraploid and a diploid ryegrass. Then we've got a couple of annual clovers, or at least one, I think. And we've got red and white clover as for the semi-permanents. And then I put in a bit of plantain and chicory, which I normally would. I added Phacelia and vetch just because I had them in the shed. We put subclover in because I think it might be time to start trying a bit of subclover. And I put lucerne in there just for the hell of it, and thinking the lucerne's going to get nuked. It's either going to not like the competition, or the stock are going to preferentially graze it, and they're just going to bash it to the ground. But I thought I'll give it a crack anyway. So that was what we did. So we ended up with that's what it looked like before we grazed it. So you can see it's gone. There's volunteer barley and the grasses and things and the oats and that sort of stuff all went leggy, but that's all right. Looking down on it, that was what we had. So what you've got to look at there is that there's full barley residue under there. It's got a mix of everything in there, and there are no weeds. And usually, if we were planting pasture, we would have had to have given it a herbicide by now. But there were no weeds, and I thought, what the hell's going on here? But yeah, that's what it looks like. So we've given it a graze and then retired it for the winter. So it'll be interesting to see how it comes out. So yeah, so that's sort of where we're at. What else have I got in here? I've got, there was just a few other bits and pieces, like just a few drilling shots, like that's typical of how we would plant peas. That one there is interesting. This one was establishing peas on the left-hand side, where it looks like it's a pretty good establishment. That was going all right, but it was marginally wet, but I carried on anyway and got rained out. And then I came in later on when it was still too wet in hindsight, and that was the mess we made. So that's how important it is. That's the same paddock, same crop, everything. Just the only difference is that one crop is one side of it was drilled in reasonable conditions, the other was drilled when it was too wet. So there's a good lesson. A lot of the time, it's just about what the soil conditions were like. So yeah. So that was the peas we planted in the spring, and see there's full residue there again, and that's the sort of what we normally get, and then that's a wee bit later, just a little bit later. So yeah, that's what. But and the importance of just to show the importance of the full residue. That's what happens when we don't get full residue cover. So you can see there, that was wheat into wheat residue, that was a big cover crop that was ungrazed. But the interesting thing there is that where there was even slightly less of the cover crop, we ended up with the weeds coming through. In this case, dog daisy, which is a shit of a thing, because there's no way you can get that out of peas. So well, not cheaply anyway. So that was a bit of a lesson. You can see there's a wee bit of regrowth oats there, but yeah, they're not a problem in peas. And so yeah, hopefully something like that turns out to look like that, which it did. So nice clean crop and all that sort of thing. So the cover crop's gone, and all that's left is a bit of wheat residue. So so yeah, that's what.
You've got a bit of a knack for photography there, Mike, by the looks of things.
Yeah, yeah.
We might have to get you to send us that cover crop diagram that you had too, with the sowing, the different root architectures and depths. That I've never seen that one before.
Yeah, that's Cotswold Seeds in the UK. Yeah, yep, I can do that. Yeah, so yeah, so when we started growing cover crops, I was looking around for seed, and the only one I couldn't get properly was vetch. So we started growing our own vetch. First year I grew common vetch. It grew tall. It was amazing. It's but it all went down on the ground. But yeah, that was our first attempt at it. So it was it just turned out really well. So we've been doing that ever since. So this year, I've got another picture here. This one here is this paddock is going. This was out of barley, so there's full barley residue under there. A wee bit of barley regrowth. We've got young cattle in here. We've got Angus calves. About 140k live weight so far, and that's the oats, Phacelia, vetch, rye corn mix, and the two clovers. Yeah, it's the autumn one that's got the two clovers in it as well. And so that to me on the right hand side is a perfect seed bed. So yeah, so that's what we're into. So yeah, linseed.
So Mike, you've been doing this for a very long time. How long have you been crop farming on the hills for now, Mike?
It's multi-generational, but I started here with my father in a partnership I started working for him in 1983, and we went 100% no-till while Dad was still here. Bless his heart, and my mother had been in pony club and horses all her life, or she had until she died a few years ago. And in horse terms, Dad ran me on a loose rein. In other words, he reckoned that the only way I'm going to learn is you learn more from your mistakes than you do from your successes. So he let me have a go with no-till. But it wasn't until he retired that we went 100% no-till. But it was, it was quite interesting the way he did it. He gave me three conditions when we started with no-till, and hopefully I can remember what they are off the top of my head. And the first one was no more than 10% of your total crop area, of our crop area, is going into no-till, because it's only an experiment. So you don't want to do the whole farm. Second one was that you need a plan B. You need to know what your plan B is before you start, because if this all turns to custard, you want to get out of it without losing the shirt on your back. And that was a bit like Roger was talking about before, where you try little bits and pieces. And the third one, which I found the most interesting, his third condition was, and you need to now go and do some reading. You need to read up, you need to talk to people, you need to make a few phone calls, and you need to know how to do it right. Because you'll never know if a system like that works unless you apply it in its 100% pure form. And so that's what I did. So I eliminated all mechanical risk by starting with the most expensive and biggest drill you could get, and we sort of moved from there. So that's sort of where my thought processes come from. And what I was doing, but with the no-till, was that I said way back at the start that I thought that this was the be-all and end-all of stopping soil erosion. But I found out it wasn't only about soil erosion, it was about soil condition. And when I look back on my career, my 22 years of no-till plus what we did before that, all we ever did, I don't consider myself as being innovative. I just look at it as I've just gone through the process of problem solving. So every time we had a problem, we would solve it. We would look at it and say, okay, we need to stop soil erosion. Let's stop moving soil. We need to, some of our crops are finishing too dry. And it was going to cost us millions of dollars to irrigate, and it was pretty hard to irrigate this sort of country anyway. So, okay, let's try and lose less moisture. And then we found that fertilizer was costing us $240,000 a year. So let's see what we can do to leave some of that fertility here, rather than sending it up in a ball of smoke or putting it on the back of a truck to take to some lucky dairy farmer. So all we ever did was and then the cover crops now are addressing the below ground soil quality. So all we've ever done is problem solve. And I reckon that's the problem with modern agriculture, is that modern agriculture over the last 150 years has problem solved as well. So they'll come up with a solution to something that may, but in a lot of cases, modern agriculture, by creating, there's never a shortage of ideas from Bayer or from John Deere or from my local bank or anybody about how I'm going to pay for and apply a solution to a problem. But a lot of the time, that solution might cause two more problems. So we've got rid of the first problem, but we've got two other ones that now we have to call on Bayer again, or we have to call on some other bloody outfit to make something that costs us $120 a hectare to apply. So I could see that on our situation that wasn't going to work. So we just had to come up with a solution to that. And I think I have, but I'm sort of a wee bit reluctant to apply regen ag in its purest form right from the word go, because we're 100 years into a conventional system. So our ground is not conditioned to looking after itself anymore. We need to almost reconvert. We need to wake that soil up and try to get it to to do what soil used to do millions, for the last millions of years until we came along and started doing things for it. Like we would assist it with nitrogen, we would assist it with weed control, and the only reason, I reckon, the main reason we cultivated soil was because we were trying to create a seed bed that our drill could cope with. And so I sort of looked at it and thought, well, if we need to change that seed bed to solve a problem, we need to change our drill to something that can cope with that situation. And so that's why we run the cross slaughter. That's why Roger runs his weaving, is because we've found a solution to getting through that residue.
So Mike,
so that's sort of where we're at.
So that's actually come up in a couple of previous ones about, like the amount of soil biological activity in Simon Oswald's soils, for example, versus someone who hasn't been doing what he's been doing for as long as he has.
Yeah.
What other key messages do you have, from your experience of going no-till and now your experience of, increasing that diversity and trying to increase that life on your farm to try and, help prevent pests and disease and improve the soil health and all the other goals? What are your kind of key takeaways for other people that are starting to make those steps?
Oh shit, that's an interesting one. It's for me, it was about learning how to recognize whether it was a problem or not. Like I had to, the regen ag thing that we're doing now is me learning how to farm all over again for at least the third time in my life. I had to learn how to farm, then I had to learn how to farm under no-till, then I had to learn how to farm under the cover crop system. So, but yeah, it's that's what we're going for ultimately. We're going for, if we do get any water runoff, we want it to be clean. So I know that there's very few phosphates leaving, there's very little soil leaving, that sort of thing, and very few other nutrients leaving. But to get to that situation, to get to that position, I had to be able to look at something and know whether it was on course or not. And there's really no way of doing that without living the life. You've really got to involve yourself in other people's business, basically. And I went through, I think Simon did the same thing. We went through 20 odd years of being told that we're mad. You don't do it that way because that's not the accepted way, or but I'd be saying, yeah, but that's all right for you to say. And like I came to the conclusion 5 years ago, I'm picking the wrong mentors. Like I've spent a lot of time with a guy who's now used to be one of my neighbours and who now farms in Pendarvis by the name of Ross Hewson, who a lot of people might know. Him and I have got on very well in the past, and we've had a lot of heart-to-hearts. We both decided at the same time down here we were going to stop growing white clover because we just couldn't stop it from growing. Whereas now where he is, all he needs to do is to flick a switch or apply an app on it for his irrigator on the mobile phone, and all of a sudden it stops growing and it starts flowering. But we never had that privilege down here. So yeah, apart from that, Ross was the wrong person to look to for advice because he does things so differently to what we do here. So I just you've really just got to associate with people that are where you want to be.
Roger.
And, that's the main take home message. And be bold, take 5% of your crop area or something like that and be bold and just go for it. Like, I don't know whether you noticed it or not there, but there's just, slugs for us just don't seem to be an issue anymore. And I really don't know why. But I was talking to a guy in the UK at one stage when we were over there in 2016, and he was talking about how the same as what one guy said here was that slug eggs are caviar to earthworms. And so what you've got to do is provide a soil surface that is conducive to having worms come up and feast on those slug eggs. Because otherwise, if we've got bare soil over the top, then the worms are not going to come up to the bare soil even at night. So they'll only come up when rain causes the soil to reach field capacity. And by then, they're struggling to survive anyway. So he says, what you've got to do is you've got to have the worms traveling the full soil profile. And so that's what we've done. And I don't know whether that's the reason why or not, or whether it's just the fact that we're on, less rainfall, lighter soils. I don't know what it is, but Yeah, we just don't seem to have the slug issues. We baited about 30 hectares this year, but I don't consider that to be an issue because we baited it and then they're gone again. Oh, that was another thing too. Is it somewhere down in here? This is a very, I forgot to show you this paddock. Keith Gundry, the agronomist for Pure Oil New Zealand, he's who we grow the oilseed rape for, and I'm doing his head in at the moment because I consider that to be a perfect seed bed. And you look at that, and that is actually a really good oilseed rape establishment. And in fact, there's far too many plants in there. But Keith looked at it and he says, "You're going to need slug bait because of all that trash." And I says, first thing, Keith, don't call it trash. To call it trash is to say that it has no value. That is a very valuable and precious commodity, that residue sitting on top of there. So don't let anybody call it trash. Right next to that is a paddock that was ex-pasture, but it had a Californian thistle problem that I wanted to deal with chemicals. So I did, and that would have left it 8 weeks as just sitting there bare because I'd rounduped it off. And I thought, shit, that's no good. So we put a short-term cover crop in there, and the cover crop got up to over my knees. And that's what it looked like when the oilseed rape was just coming through. And now it is every bit as good as the one behind it. I should have taken a picture of it today, but I forgot. So you can see there the cover crop is all melted down and everything. And there's bare soil, which is, to me, is shocking. I don't like bare soil anywhere at all. So, yeah. So anyway, I forgot to put those, show those pictures. Yeah.
Awesome, Mike. That is fantastic, man. And from what I hear from you, and what you're sharing and as discussions we've had prior to this day is, really the learning never stops, does it? And so surrounding yourself with people that encourage learning and openness and willingness to learn and adapt. And, a saying comes to mind that there's people that see the problem in every opportunity, and there's people that see the opportunity in every problem. And I think we're that sort of group. We like to see the opportunity in every problem. So, thanks so much for your sharing this evening, Mike. We are getting on for time. So, Sam, why don't we go through some of these questions and give the boys a chance to answer some of these questions? What do you reckon?
Yep. No, I think it's a goodie. Have you got one in mind to kick off with?
Yep. So, I'll start with a really good one down here from Nigel Greenwood. Both of you guys, this is for both of you, a quick spiel, please, mindful of time. It doesn't require much. Are you finding a reduction in ag chemical inputs?
I'll answer first. There's two parts to that question, or to answer it. One is a reduction in inputs price-wise, or a reduction in inputs as in litres. And I'm going to answer that by saying that it's only since we've grown cover crops that we've really cut down on the amount of both the amount and the cost of the ag chem. Before that, in the just a straight no-till, we were using more than we did before, but we were using a third as much fuel with one person less. So we were making the savings in other places. But since we've been growing the cover crops, we're now using glyphosate. I'm chelating it with mobilizer. And we've got the rate down to only 2/3 or less of what we used to use before. And we use more glyphosate, which means that the other more expensive targeting type specialist chemicals we don't have to use anywhere near as much of. So that's all I need to say.
Fantastic. And Roger, what have you found, man, with regards to chemical usage?
Well, because we haven't been doing a lot of cover cropping, I suppose our chemical usage is very similar. It hasn't gone up, but this last year with my peas, I had one paddock there because of the cover crop. When I was looking at spraying like I'd normally do, there wasn't any weeds, so I didn't. But I probably should have. There was weeds then came later on, which does seem to happen with direct drilling. But even though you haven't sort of disturbed the ground just with environmental factors, the ground seems to, like Willowbridge here is known for weeds. I reckon if you take all the weed seeds out of Willowbridge, it'll drop a foot. So we're battling against weeds, but yeah, I think, as Mike says, the cover cropping probably helps. And I have noticed this year where we've sowed the wheat into after those peas, where that cover crop was prior, we haven't had any slugs, which is a real win for us because we're always slug baiting. You know, we probably bait everything once and then possibly twice, but yeah, I think maybe there is something in this cover cropping in terms of, I don't know, is it nematodes or something, or earthworms or whatever it is that, you know, there's definitely something happening there.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
perfect.
Awesome, thanks. There's another question from Nigel there, who's hogging the limelight, around calcium magnesium ratios and whether you've been exploring that on your various properties.
So we've just dabbled really, I think, Nigel. This year I am actually using topsoils. I've used Jeremy Cunningham prior to that. I gave him 3 paddocks and told him I'd try it for 3 years, but then I noticed my yields are dropping off on my combine harvester compared to, you know, what I had side by side, but I just don't think he had the ratios right. And Lydia, I've seen next door at my cousin's, she's been working there and she seems to be having very successful result there. So I've employed her this year, and we'll just see where that goes.
Yeah, as far as we went, we had, I used to deal with Superior Minerals, later on Superior, but we had problems with what they changed agents, and we just didn't get back in contact, and I've been doing this sort of thing ever since. So I haven't been following the calcium magnesium ratio for quite a while. We did do it at the start, but yeah, haven't been doing it for a long time. I should get back into it, but I'm too busy with the cover crop stuff at the moment and trying to get that right, and then I'll come back. Yeah.
Right on. Cheers. Hey, Jono, these other questions were from probably quite a long way back in the thing. So I wonder if we wanted any quick sort of wrap up questions from both Roger and Mike that spring to mind.
Well, there's what type of winter wheat would you add in the seed mix, upright or prostrate? Dave's answered his own question. It would definitely have to be upright, otherwise it would just get lost. So yeah, yep. But the trouble is, there's not a lot of upright wheats now. Most of them are prostrate. But anyway, yeah, I'll find something. I hope. It was only an idea, but I reckon it would work. Yeah.
All right.
I think I'll ask one question, and it's for both of you guys. What's it been like being involved in a group where we're encouraged to challenge our thinking and to really be surrounded by, like, I want to hear from you guys what it's been like really being part of the group, Quorum Sense.
Well, for me, sorry, Roger, you carry on.
Well, for me, it's just great to, you sort of feel like you're battling away yourself. You know, you watch a lot of YouTube videos and do a lot of research and so on, and it's really good that you guys have got this together. And I've really been enjoying James Harford, his little videos actually, and the things he's been going through, and then of course Mike as well. And it just gives you great encouragement to, you know, that we're all in it together, and hopefully together, you know, as the Quorum Sensing word is that, you know, we will come up with a formula that works for us.
Yeah, it's no different to you know, we talk about diversity in a cover cropping sense and in a microbial sense, and it's no different in humans. You know, we need that diversity, and it's pretty cool to have that, you know, diversity, but all being interested in a common goal, which is our progression in agriculture. What about you, Mike?
Yeah, for me, I actually feel quite humbled being in this group, because like I see a lot of these guys, the ones that are doing a lot of they're doing the regen ag grazing and doing that sort of thing, rather than the arable side. They're more on the pastoral side. And I'm looking at it and going at the comments and that sort of thing that are going on in there, and thinking, shit, you guys are good. Yeah, it's just amazing. Everybody has their own specialty, And yeah, that's like I'm just dabbling at the moment with that pasture that I had on the pictures there. But oh shit, it's just amazing. There's such a great knowledge base, and all you need to do is you just fire a question out there, and if it's on cover crops, then chances are I'll pick that up, or somebody else who's growing them. But then if it's a grazing one, then either Michael or somebody along those lines will pick it up, and it's just fantastic. And we're all sort of looking in, and I'm thinking, God, these guys are good. It's great. Yeah.
Yeah, who would I'd never heard of anyone grazing 100 bulls in a mob before. Alistair Mayer was doing it this year, and then the other day I heard there's a guy in the Wairarapa who's about to give it a crack.
Yeah, that sort of thing. There's consultants out there that will tell you, no, it can't be done. It just can't be done. Yeah.
Yeah, not John O'Frew.
No. And that's a phrase we don't use in quorum sense, right? It can't be done. We don't hear that.
Yeah. Well, that was what I found when we that was the great thing about visiting the USA when we did the first time in 2010, doing a reconnaissance mission looking for solutions to harvesting. And those guys over here, I was told by the John Deere salesman in Mid Canterbury, no, it can't be done. Whereas over there, they say anything can be done, and they just, you pull out your checkbook and you ask how much is it going to cost to solve this problem. Yeah, and that's
in America, it's let's double the size while we're there.
Yeah.
Hey guys, look, I'm going to take this opportunity to personally thank both of you for the time that you've spent with us this evening. It's been a real pleasure. Aside from my technical issues that I had, which I apologise for, I don't know what happened there. But what I did here, guys, was just, I'll use your word, Mike, super humbling to hear, to listen to you guys, to hear the enthusiasm and the passion behind what you're doing, and, taking the opportunity to share it with others. I'm sure you've inspired a lot of people to have a look for themselves. So thank you guys very much.
Thanks, yeah. Just one more thing. There's a question on there from Peter Legg, just asking when do we sow our winter feed mix. That was planted in... It was around about September, the middle of September, somewhere around there. I just did it when it was second year kale, and so I just planted it when the conditions were right. And as far as the cover crops go, we're in there planting them virtually as soon as the header leaves, and in some cases the drill's in the paddock when the header is as well. So the drill's going until the drill driver gets a phone call to say, we need you over at the harvester.
Hey, on that note, thanks very much, everybody. And thanks everyone who joined us tonight. And thanks for the questions, especially. And hope everyone has a great week. And I guess we'll hopefully all catch you next week. Time and topic to be confirmed. Watch this space.